it anymore.
You have to have these difficult conversations.
So the movement is about equality.
That was a really intense debate.
Let's just keep it strictly about facts and we'll be good.
I mean, this is a verbal fight. I mean,
It is.
We invite you to be a part of the league and participate in actually debating.
Can you hear me now?
Good evening, Great Debate League. I am your moderator and host for this evening, Ebony Johnson. We appreciate you for taking part in tonight's debate, and I hope that you can stay with us until the end as we rely on your votes to determine who is the greater debater. Tonight's premise: Black people exaggerate their experience of racism in the U.S. Arguing the affirmative, Justin Wilson, a Brooklyn, New York native who is a Seventh-day Adventist with a bachelor's in theology. Arguing the negative, Professor A.J. Lowe, born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. He is a professor of U.S. history and Black studies in Kansas City. He specializes in 20th century racial violence and lynch culture in America. Tonight's guiding definition: Black Americans, an ethnic group of Americans with total or partial ancestry from any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Exaggerate, represent something as being larger, better, or worse than it really is. Experience, encounter or undergo an event or occurrence. Racism, prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. US/USA, America, all United States territories and jurisdictions. This is an unranked debate. There will be no personal attacks of any kind, no profanity, and no interrupting. Both participants are allowed to call a fact-check timeout only during one of their designated speaking times. The Great Debate League provides an opportunity to sharpen your voice and broaden your perspective. We invite you to join the league. And now we will begin tonight's debate. Round one, opening statements. Each participant will provide an uninterrupted opening statement. They each have 3 minutes for their statement. We will begin with Justin Wilson arguing the affirmative. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Wilson of Seventh-day Adventist, and I enjoy being here, but I cannot wait to discuss this subject because I think it's very relevant considering the amount of exaggeration that's going on, and it's controlling politics. So my position is that Black people exaggerate racism here in the United States. And I have 5 reasons for that. Now, the first reason is an obvious reason, which I kind of presented in my explanation at the beginning of the show, or the other day on Tuesday, which was basically there has been a rise on fake hate crimes where people claim that they were victims of hate crimes when it didn't really happen. Actually, they actually made the hate crime happen by spray painting hate words such as the N-word, or, putting out spray paint of like Trump statements saying MAGA, country, for example. We all know about Jussie Smollett. There's been other cases that has been gone unnoticed. The Jussie Smollett case is famous because Jussie Smollett is a famous person. But all these other cases have been thrown out of the discussion. We don't even talk about them, but they've been happening so many times. I mean, there's hundreds of cases. So, for example, there's this young man named Clive. Let me get to that real quick. This young man named Clifton Etsy, 18. He accused people out there that he was a victim of a hate crime because his car was spray painted with pretty much hate speech, where it says Trump, Trump 4 more years, and you see a swastika and so on. Later on, they found out that he was the one that actually put that there. Now, you wouldn't have to do that if racism was a reality every single day to the point of, we need to actually march every single day or have these rallies that we've been having since George Floyd. This wouldn't have to happen if racism or our racial experience was to the degree that we say it is. There's other cases. So, for example, there was an issue in an Ohio State college where they claimed that they were pretty much angry that they mentioned a hate crime that happened, but they didn't mention the victims. And basically, when they found out who were the victims, they found out that the hate crime was a black on white hate crime. And once that happened, once everyone figured out that it was a black on white hate crime, then they started protesting and speaking ill against the school, saying that they were actually making the environment dangerous for black people. So whenever the hate crime is black.
Now we will move to Professor Lowe arguing the negative. You have 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here this evening to dissolve a myth that has gained traction in America over the past decades. The idea that the experiences of African Americans have in regards to race are exaggerated is beyond preposterous. This assumption was created by many conservatives as a means to downplay white racism. To justify their ridiculous claims, they use African Americans as tokens to push altered narratives. These black people end up making a fool of themselves either because they are ignorant to the facts or seek favor with the white masses as an attempt to project ideas that are hardly supported by statistics or reality. The fact is, America's foundation as a country was created and maintained by racism. Racist ideas can easily be found in Americans' governing documents, preserved by American law, and executed by American citizens. Black people of color in general, and people of color in general, and black people in particular, are complaining about microaggressions in the workplace all the time. 8 out of 10 black adults with at least some college experience report having experienced racial discrimination at least some of the time, including 1 out of 6 who say it happens regularly. Are these people making these experiences up? The U.S. Census Bureau and the Brookings Institute statistics provide overwhelming evidence that will support the fact that black people are not exaggerating their racial experiences at all. 1 in 5 black borrowers are turned down for a conventional loan. Black women die 3 times more often than whites when giving birth. Black men and women have shorter life expectancies in America than whites. Black poverty is at 21% as opposed to white poverty being 8.7%, while black people only number 13% of the total population. I can go on and on this evening with these facts, but you guys get the point. As I've stated many times, I've dedicated my life to fighting white supremacy in all fronts, in all forms, and this situation is no different. Even if that means humbling and chastising other black people that hold toxic white supremacist views. Although my opponent seems to be a bright individual, tonight we watch him struggle to defend the premise because in the end, the facts are not on his side. As I close, I ask everyone watching to exercise patience with my brother as he carries a heavy burden of proof, attempting to convince us all that our racial experiences are in our heads.
All right, thank you so much for those opening statements, gentlemen. Now for round 2. This is the lightning round, which allows for an open cross-examination between both participants to engage in interrogation of their opponent's position. This is a shared time frame for both debaters. Audience, please listen carefully and pose your questions for our debaters in our comments section. Our audience Q&A is the next round. This round is 15 minutes. Gentlemen, you may begin.
Good evening, sir. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, praise God.
I just want to tell you that this is about to happen out of a place of love. But this is the night that you will end up eventually abandoning this ideology. I got a question. How many cases of hate crimes are you talking about? Like fake hate crimes are you talking about? I want to hear the numbers.
Well, I've looked. There's a website that actually records the hate crimes for, I would say, the past 3 or 4 years. There's about like 400. Now, I didn't go through all of them to actually see like which ones were Black involved only. Now, there were many that actually I took, for example, that I was going to think about presenting, such as there were like 10 that I took out just as a sample of the hundreds of cases.
Okay, so you only have 400 cases out of how many people in the United States?
Well, there's many cases that just go, unrecognized. But most of those cases are they make a headline and then they correct it like weeks later once people don't even know about it.
Okay, where are you getting this information? Just curious.
Well, this information is coming from local news. So they make these reports, and then there's databases that record all these things.
You just said you got it from a website.
Yeah, website that records, that take all these local news stories, collect them, and then actually compare them to when they make the correction afterwards. Once they make a conclusive investigation, then they actually look into it and then file it into a false or fake hate crime.
I see. What's the website called?
Well, it's called fakehatecrime.com.
Oh, okay. So it's a .com. Okay. Next question I got for you, brother, is the Black on white hate crimes. What's the percentage of that?
Well, Black on white hate crime, that's around like 23%. When it comes to like white, it's around like 52%. And
where are you getting the statistics?
The FBI, FBI crime, stats.
Okay, where are these Black on white hate crimes concentrated at?
Well, I would have to look at it. I don't recall, but I would imagine it's happening in urban areas.
Now, if these Black on hate crimes are occurring at the percentages you're stating, my question to you is why isn't it being covered, especially when Black Lives Matter protests where property damage is absolutely covered? So why wouldn't Black on white people that would fit an absolute narrative? So I'm curious where you're getting this.
Well, the reason why it's not being covered is because there's a certain narrative that the mainstream is trying to push. So you got HBO, you got all the social media platforms, you got Netflix, you got Facebook, everything. They are all gearing into sponsoring Black Lives Matter because it's a political. It fits their political side. So they want the Democrat side. They want the more left-leaning story to prevail. And the left-leaning story that would prevail is, or that they want to prevail, is that Black people are victims and that white supremacists, who are in their minds typically Trump supporters, are the villains. So they don't want to, show too many stories that make Black people look in any way disparagingly like worthy of suspicion. So, for example, the story of those teens that try to rob that Uber car, Uber Eats delivery guy. When that happened, they weren't trying to cover it much, but because it went viral, they had to cover it. And
okay, all right, I have a question for you. Do you think that Trump represents white supremacy?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Not even though he is supported by white supremacy hate groups, that does not make him an agent of white supremacy.
Yeah, just like how Biden, he is supported by Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer voted for Biden in this election.
I don't know if I necessarily believe that, especially because Richard Spencer has always been an advocate for Donald Trump. I know who Richard Spencer is.
Well, you can look it up right now, and it was a surprise.
No, sir, that is not the way this debate goes. You are in the affirmative. It's your responsibility to.
So I affirm that that's true.
Okay, well, you got to provide some evidence, brother. It doesn't work like that. We're dealing in scholarship.
Okay, so Richard Spencer, it was actually made a big story, but I guess you guys didn't put it into memory.
No, I'm saying that the only places that I'm imagining this type of information flowing out is what is it? One American Network, OAN, and Fox News.
Well, no,
I know that they don't deal in reality. So
I'm actually looking at Business Insider right now.
You're looking it up in where?
Business Insider.
Business Insider that Richard Spencer supported Biden over Trump.
Yeah.
And how does this not make Trump a white supremacist?
Well, wait, hold on, excuse me. I'm sharing my screen right now. So it proves my point right here.
No. How does this not make Trump a white supremacist?
Well, because the people who support you doesn't necessarily reflect you. So if someone who's gay supports me, that doesn't mean I'm gay. That just doesn't follow. You just have common ground in certain areas, but that doesn't mean they share everything.
When he tells a white supremacist hate group that is actually backing him to stand back and stand by, and then that white supremacist hate group ends up storming the Capitol when he tells them we got to stop the election, those two don't correlate.
No, those don't correlate because one, the Proud Boys are not a white supremacist hate group. In fact, the leaders, such as like Enriquez, he's a Black Cuban. Now, what happens is we ignore all that. Every evidence that shows that they're not white supremacists, we dismiss it. And then evidence doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is your narrative.
I will agree with the last part that you said in this conversation is that evidence is not mattering right now. Is that we are not dealing in reality right now. The reason why I say that is because I am a part of several Proud Boy sites. I personally am.
You personally are. So you're a racist?
Am I a racist? Come on, sir. Now, let's not.
That's what you're assuming because you're saying the Proud Boys is a racist group. How could you be part of it and not be racist?
Sir. What I am saying is that I see the information that is being posted. I didn't say I participate. I said I am actually watching. I'm witnessing what they are talking about. Everything that they have talked about is what I specialize in.
Okay, give me a quote give me a quote of something they do, their plans.
Okay.
Because we can't say wait. Statements.
No, I'll tell you what. Just based out of at a straight education, I'm going to give you the quote, right? But after that, this is still your burden. I see how you're trying to deflect, but I'll give you the quote, right? How about George Floyd deserved to be killed? How about that one?
Okay, who said that?
We're talking about the Proud Boys website.
Well, I mean, he may have, but what does his race have to do with it?
What I'm saying is that this is a racist organization. You keep deflecting to try to
no. If someone said that I deserve to die, I need to know: are they saying that because of my race or because of something I did? If it's my actions, then it has nothing to do with my race.
Okay, understood. All right. Well, you've seen the George Floyd situation, right?
Yes.
Did he deserve to die?
No, he didn't deserve to die at that moment. No.
So would you say that anybody that would see that tape and say that, well, that guy deserved to die has to have racism at the root of their ideology?
No, they may have some information about him that would cause them to feel like he deserved to die. So for example,
what information would that be? Because
people bring up the story about the reason why he went to prison for several years before this incident and he came out.
That's a reason.
No. Let me explain. The reason why is because there was a robbery that he was a part of, and he actually had a gun, and he pointed the gun at a pregnant woman's womb or her stomach. So if you're that grimy that you would actually threaten to shoot a mother at her, like kill the baby and the mother, you must be a really bad person. So they're saying that if you do something like that, then karma is going to come at you at some point.
Did he deserve to die for that?
Well, yeah, some people actually believe that. I don't believe that.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that it's just me and you here. I'm just asking you, did he deserve to die for that?
No, I don't believe that. I can understand some other people believe that, but that has if he was white and he did that, I believe that those people would say the same thing, and I would say the same. I would say something similar. I wouldn't say that he deserved to die. I believe because he didn't do the action. He didn't kill anyone.
Okay, all right. What about Trayvon Martin? Did he deserve to die?
Okay. No, he didn't deserve to die. The question about whether he deserved to die has nothing to do with his race.
How does it not? I can provide for you right now overwhelming evidence of Black people and or African Americans getting killed by white civilians and police officers, white police officers.
Yeah, and
overwhelming evidence. And you're saying the race doesn't play a factor in this.
See, okay, race does play a factor, and this is why.
So
this is how. Let me explain how. Let me explain how. Because Black people commit 50% of the crime in America. We overrepresent like the crime or the suspicion of doing something that is murderous. So because we represent that as far as like homicides, we're going to have more altercations with cops. There's going to be more cops in our neighborhoods. So that's going to rate. I'm getting that from the FBI crime statistics.
Okay, all right, okay. So, okay, we'll explain this, right? So African Americans are 13% of the population, correct?
Yes.
Okay, white Americans are 64% of the population, correct?
Sure, around there.
Right? They follow a gentleman, Donald Trump, who is was able to get 74 million or 70 million people to vote for him, which is roughly, since that's, we're going to say that out of 69% or 69 million of those were just straight white Americans based off of the numbers.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Well, no, it wasn't. No. Well, yeah, of course that's the case. But when it comes to politics, white people are half and half between Republican and Democrat. So, sure.
I'm saying that the white Americans that voted for Trump it was more than half. It was like 60%.
Yeah. But see, this election, there was more white people that voted for Biden than Trump this year.
I'm not sure if that's absolutely true, but this is the point I was trying to make. If we're talking about the African Americans, even though I would still like to see the statistics of African Americans as far as arrest rates, definitely. What I'm saying is convictions for crimes, you're looking at African Americans being convicted at 40%, which is just about the same amount as white Americans. The only difference is that white Americans end up numbering their total population is more than us. So it's a misrepresentation.
Well, when you look at the crime statistics of us committing murder, like homicide, those type of things, we represent 50%. So any group of person or group of people that actually commit that much crime, you're going to bring the law against you. You're going to bring cops around you, and that's going to just cause negative altercations. If that happened in the white community, if the white community was committing crime 5 times more than their population, then of course they're going to have more police altercations as well.
Where are you getting this, man? Like, hold on.
FBI crime statistics.
Hold on. First off, let me explain to you, bro. Remember that we only number 13% of the population, right? So that means that if we're overrepresented in the prison population if we're 40%. What you're saying is that, oh, well, African Americans, they kill each other, right? So they're supposed to be locked up.
Well, not just each other. We also represent like interracial crimes. So like black against white.
Flash the stats on the screen. Flash them. I want to see them.
Okay, so
I want to see them right now.
Okay, so for example, let me get to that real quick. So when it comes to black against white, well, that's hate crime. But when it comes to black against whites, we overrepresent. Like we do it 10 times. Hold on, let me get to that real quick.
Yeah, I want to see this because especially for a situation like Fox News or One American Network, that would be absolute news. African Americans rioting, that is, I want you to understand as a historian, right? That is a trope that white Americans have been terrified of, is the Black Revolution, right? They just made a whole movie called the Judas and the Black Messiah about a Black Panther who is getting killed because he's about to start a revolution. So what you're saying is that white Americans have been witnessing black people kill white people and never said anything about it.
Oh no, we're saying a lot about it. It's just that it goes underreported and
how
it doesn't make
national. How are you the only person that has heard about these type of
the story is the white man is the villain, he's the white supremacist, and black people are the victims.
Would you say that
the stories don't go far?
Would you say that racism,
local news areas?
Would you say that racism is at the core of American history?
Well, yeah, it's yeah, sure.
Okay, so when do you think that racism ended?
Well, it started to fade away around, like, I would say the 60s, the 70s, the 80s.
Are you serious?
Yeah, sure.
You can't, then you know what? Here's what I would suggest to you, sir. What you need to do is go ahead and sign up for one of my history classes, because we can go ahead and dissolve all of that right now. I see that this situation is based off of you not understanding American history.
No, at this point,
you cannot tell me you know American history. You're gonna tell me that racism started to fade away in the 60s.
Well, I mean,
I
can't say for sure, considering, you know,
I know you can't say for sure.
Yeah, each person did not die, but as far as treatment, as far as opportunity, all that is not in our way. You have no idea what you're talking about, sir. You are in uncharted territory. You do not know what you were talking about. So let me ask you this: so why do you feel Justice Smollett had to actually make a
you got one case? I can
okay. So how about
how
about the case for like one guy I just mentioned? I could do several cases.
How about
I can do several cases, which I have listed.
Ooh, you gotta say.
All right, gentlemen, that's time. Thank you so much for a spirited lightning round. We will now begin round 3, the audience question and answer round. We invite our audience to submit questions for the debaters. Each participant will be given the chance to respond to each question uninterrupted. Please submit your questions now. As we bring up our audience questions, please support our growth by donating to our Cash App, $, The Great Debate League. Check us out on our YouTube channel, Great Debate League Inc., and become a member of our Patreon page. We are also on Instagram, and you can subscribe to our podcast on Spotify and iHeartRadio. And now we will take our first audience question. We will begin with Justin Wilson arguing the affirmative. And Bruce, are we ready for our first audience question? You can place it on the screen. All right. Can you provide an example of racism either sustaining or deteriorating after the 1960s? Justin, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Well, you know, when it comes to systemic racism, I've seen that everyone had pretty much had opportunity to actually overcome. Now, when it comes to like racism, that, you know, we can see it's clear, like saying the N-word, you know, discriminating in those things, that was still there. But the system itself, that I believe that was going away. So I can't really give, you know, clear example of that. But as far as my memory, that's what it seemed like that was the case.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And Professor AJ, we will ask you the same question. Can you provide an example of racism either sustaining or deteriorating after the 1960s? You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
I'm going to make this swift for my brother because this is a quick lesson for him, and I really hope you're paying attention. During the 1960s is when the civil rights movement really starts to make traction, right? But then you see a whole resurgence of conservative ideology. There's a gentleman that I want you to look up, sir, and I'm sure that this gentleman has influenced your ideology. His name is Lee Atwater. Lee Atwater created the conservative, the fiscal conservative ideology that is deeply rooted in racism, right? You have the busing, which ends up school busing that happens in the 1970s. Like I said, it's fascinating to watch this young man throw this out there with very little evidence. And it's obvious my homeboy needs some major history lessons. So sign up, homie. Sign up.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor AJ. Now for our second question. And as we're preparing to bring that second question up, okay, here we go. Never mind. Do we commit 50% of crimes, or are Black people more often convicted for crimes by a white supremacist system? Justin, this question goes to you. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
No, we commit 50% of the 50% of the homicides. So it's not just like crimes such as like jaywalking or, you know, weed and those things. No, actually 50% of the homicides, those cases that have been proven to be, you know, the case. So that's kind of hard to get around. And even if some of them were, they were mistrials or whatever, we should not be that high considering that we only represent 13% of the population. And then also we look around, if you actually look at, you know, if you look at even social media, you will find 10 out of 10, most of these videos of people fighting and violence and murder, you find Black people doing it. You will find, you see like Black people fighting in Florida. We will make a big commotion if we find white people having a brawl. You say, oh, white people do it too. We say that because normally we see Black people doing it. And that's why we have websites like, World Star Hip Hop. That is a normal thing, especially for us in the ghetto. We see that happen so often that when we see it online, it's just a normal thing. But it's showing clearly that this happens like at a rate that represent 50% of the homicides as well.
Okay, the same question for you, Professor AJ. Do we commit 50% of crimes, or are Black people more often convicted for crimes by a white supremacist system?
I want to remind
1 minute and 30 seconds.
I want to remind everyone that this evening that my opponent is supposed to be affirming his statement. So he still hasn't produced evidence on this one, the 50% as far as this situation. Now, what I will say is that we're going to kill another idea, this false myth about that every time Black or police brutality happens, the Black on Black crime gets thrown out there. Number one, African American or anybody, statistics show and studies show that people kill who are close to them. Right, that's number one. All right, so the difference between police is when it happens, most police don't live in those communities. That's number one. Number two, statistics also show that African Americans and white people commit crimes at the same level. If that's the question is, why are the incarceration rates 3 times what they are for white Americans? I mean, for their population, their total population, 13% to 40%. That means that there is a disproportionate amount of African Americans being sent to jail as opposed to the white Americans that represents 60% of the population. When I'm saying that this is mad, sir, what we need to do is we need to come back. We need to have a complete come to Jesus meeting with this situation. We can't just stop today because I feel like there's more of your mind that I have to mold.
All right, and that's time for that question. Thank you both so much for that one. And now for our next question. Black people are exposed to more environmental toxins than whites, although whites generate more environmental pollution. Is this racism? Justin, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
No, it's not racism. Often it's our choice because we actually like promote violence in our music. We promote it in our lifestyle. When we think of hip hop, we think of Black. When we think of gangster rap, we think of Black. When we think of thugs, we call ourselves young thugs, little thug, all that stuff. That's Black. And then when it comes to food and all these different things that could actually help us with our health and our mindset, we kind of like look down on it and see it as white. When people speak proper, we call it white. So then we separate ourselves into a polluted environment, and we think that's what it means to be Black. And we live in these urban areas for that reason, because we think a nice neighborhood is a white neighborhood. So when someone moves out from the ghetto, we say you're moving in with white people often. So it's not racism. Often it's our choices.
Thank you, Justin. For you, Professor AJ, Black people are exposed to more environmental toxins than whites, although whites generate more environmental pollution. Is this racism?
I would say absolutely it is racism. What I find fascinating is how my opponent throws out there that, people are making a choice to live in red line communities. People are making a choice to live in these areas where they can't move in because of racial covenants, right? Do you know what a racial covenant is? I'm sorry, I'm not talking to... Racial covenants were created in the 1930s and 1940s as a way to segregate communities, brother. So most African-American areas are usually in what they call red line areas. And what happens is those areas get no equity. Do people really want to live in areas that are polluted? Who wants to live in an area that's polluted? Who is saying, you know what, I decided I want to move next to a toxic creek? That is preposterous, sir. We need to, I feel like it is my duty now to reel you back into reality right now. Because what you're saying is that African Americans are choosing this type of treatment as opposed to actually trying to do better, and actually have a systemic system of racism oppressing them. What you're carrying is the idea of a white racist, sir. What I'm saying is that we got to get out of that mindset. Because if you really live in a black community like I do, you know that no black person wants to allow for their kids to live in an area that's infested with violence, right? But the question is, why are we still having segregated communities right now in the first place?
Thank you so much, and that concludes our Q&A round. We are moving to our final round, closing statements. Each participant will provide an uninterrupted closing statements. They each have 3 minutes. We will hear the affirmative closing statement from Justin Wilson. Justin, you may begin.
Well, too bad I didn't have enough time to actually flesh out my entire argument in the intro, but let me just say this. A good reason why we have so much, I guess, injustice in the black community is because we do it to ourselves. We make these fake hoaxes, which makes it harder for anyone to believe in any real hate crime. Then also, we put ourselves in these environments where we encourage this kind of lifestyle, and then we blame white people, and then we exaggerate the racism so that it could, resolve, what's really wrong with us in some way. Then also, we ignore the fact that Nigerians and other immigrants who are black, who look no different from black Americans, they are succeeding because of their mindset. We ignore those people and we blame only white people, but really it's the success of their mind. They're actually succeeding. And then also, today we're exaggerating things such as the election, or I guess voter suppression, claiming that if we don't get water in the line, that's going to suppress the black vote. We're exaggerating that and calling that Jim Crow. I mean, as though black people are not smart enough to bring their own water or even have their own ID. That right there is an exaggeration. And that it's to the point where it's just, it's insulting to even suggest that, considering that black people have IDs. They can take planes, they can drive cars, but then when it comes to getting a voter ID, all of a sudden it's Jim Crow. So that's an example of extreme exaggeration. But when it comes to abortion, the systemic issue in abortion, we are quiet about it because we kind of agree with the white supremacists that black people should not keep on multiplying. But in other areas where the Democrats control us, we exaggerate it because we want to support their narrative where black people are the victims and that white people are the villains. If we're the victims, then we're the heroes. So these are examples of huge exaggerations. I mean, like I brought up Jussie Smollett on all these fake hate crimes. They shouldn't exist if we had so much racism. It would just come off organically. But in fact, we have to fabricate it because we don't have enough racism to fit, to fit our rhetoric. So that's my case.
All right. All right, thanks. We had a bit of a mishap there, but thanks so much to Justin for his closing statement. And now to Professor A.J. Lowe arguing the negative. You have 3 minutes.
I want to say that thank you for participating to my opponent. I want to also, again, seriously invite you to come take one of my classes because we got to get you up on American history. One of the things that I'm sure that everyone in this debate noticed is that my opponent struggled to produce any type of real evidence. He said that 400 people commit fake racial claims or fake situations like that, even though there's 330 million people in the United States. That's what's preposterous. Number two, the only example he only produces is Jussie Smollett. That's it. Other than that, he's pulling statistics out of the thin air. Talking about voter suppression, it's obvious that my opponent is not actually even watching the news because he would be able to craft his argument a little bit different if he understood what was going on in Georgia, especially with the lack of polling areas. He talks about blaming white America as if a racist system does not exist, which he already admitted that does. He admits that this racist system exists. He admits that racism is at the foundation of America, but then he does not know when it stops. It's obvious that he doesn't know when it stops. He talks about loans, foreigners coming in, African American or Black people who are from other areas other than America. He says they're able to get ahead because of their resilience, as if African Americans were not resilient. What he does not understand is basic American history or finance, right? When most African or most Black people come in from different countries, they're able to establish a line of credit through loans so they can start up businesses. But when African Americans, the history of African Americans is that the majority of African Americans came from out of slavery and we were giving nothing. But he's like, hey, you guys didn't pull yourself up by the bootstraps, I guess. Again, my opponent has only presented one. He said he was going to present 5 examples and he only presented one. And we stuck on that one because that's really all he has. And what I find fascinating in this situation is that my opponent is not acting in reality. Because in reality, the statistics show that 1 out of 1,000 Black men and boys will die at the hands of police. 1 out of 13 African Americans of voting age are disenfranchised. 44% black home ownership as opposed to 74% white home ownership. I could go on and on with the statistics. African Americans, we are not making this up. This is not a figment of our imagination.
Bruce, thank you so much to Professor A.J. Lowe and also to Justin Wilson for participating in the Great Debate League. It is our pleasure to create thought-provoking discussion on critical issues where we are able to learn from both of our presenters. To our audience, please use our new scorecard to let us know how you scored each participant's performance. This is a quick form that should only take you 2 minutes to complete. Please score each debater's performance and how they presented the following: fact-based arguments, meaning that the participant provided facts to support their arguments; subject matter expertise, meaning that they demonstrated understanding to the subject matter; persuasiveness, they were logical and convincing, provided logical and convincing arguments; elocution, they provided clear and effective communication; and finally, rebuttals, they addressed their opponent's arguments. Thank you, audience, for watching and submitting questions. We need your support to keep this program running. Please donate to our Cash App so that we can continue to grow. $ The Great Debate League. Also, please check us out on YouTube and subscribe and become a member of our Patreon page. Please join us after this broadcast for the post-debate analysis, which will start shortly. Have a great night and remember to speak the truth.